Hello, everyone, and welcome again to a new season of the New Earth podcast. This third season is going to deal with healing the world. We have spent the past decades working on ourselves, healing our trauma, reaching the ego death. And most of us are still in the process of doing that. But as we're seeing, there is no way of healing ourselves other than by also shining our light of healing outside of us so that our entire surroundings get healed and we are allowed to truly heal our trauma and to truly become our highest self. This new season is going to focus both on holistic ways of healing ourselves, but also on the things we must change altogether as a collective in our society. And I'm going to give, together with other guests, specific advice on how to do it through daily gestures so that we can finally raise the consciousness of humanity to a next level and that peace can be established in the world. Let's start. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to a new episode and actually a new season of the New Earth podcast. This season is going to be called Heal the World. So far, we have been talking about a lot of ways of healing ourselves, but then in a previous episode, if you guys have seen it, the episode Heal the World, I've talked about how it's actually important and necessary for us not only to heal ourselves, but also to heal the world because we are part of a continuum with our environment, which means that we can create a bubble around ourselves and make this bubble as pretty, as nice, and as healthy as we want. But ultimately, the pressure from our environment at some point is going to win unless we also heal our environment. So we have to keep shining our light, basically. We cannot just heal ourselves and then pretend the world is pretty anyways. Because even if we're privileged, even if we create a bubble, we are always going to be in a world that unless we heal it, that world is at war. And this is the topic of today. The topic of today is going to be war. Why war? Because the whole reason why the world does not work as we expect or it's not really healthy is ultimately because we are at war. We are in a phase like in yoga, people call this phase of humanity Kali Yuga, which is basically the age of destruction, the era of destruction. I'm not sure about that system. I'm not sure I believe in that system in the sense I have my own view of how the world is going, and you can tell from the how the past. You can tell the trend of our world and our society is going. Like we went from a period of time in ancient times in which there was a lot of violence. And, when there is a lot of violence, there is also a lot of sadism. And so we went from a world that was very violent to a world where, yes, there are still wars today, but not everybody experiences wars. And even like in the greater majority of the countries in the world, ultimately there is some form of democracy or some form of rights for the population. We have rights. Today we cannot be crucified. Today we cannot be whipped to death. Today we cannot be beaten to death. Today we cannot be tortured on a stage in front of an audience that is actually happy for us to be tortured. So you see, even if we think that things seem to go worse and worse, reality is that the world expands, like the universe expands in waves. And in the same way, the Earth is a planet, it is alive, and it has this huge, very hot core, and that is the main source of all the energy that is on our planet, including our energy, because that is heat is energy that expands. So I would like to talk about war today, not just from a standpoint, from a sociological and socio-political standpoint, but especially by taking into account um, all the different dimensions of our universe and of our planet, of us, which is the Newtonian dimension, and then the quantum physical dimension, and then the spiritual and divine dimension, the truth. And so I would like to talk about war in all of those dimensions and what it means, and ultimately what it comes down to. And then the whole purpose of this season in itself is actually to give you guys the advice on how to make peace how to raise the consciousness of humanity with just your own gestures, which have to do obviously with healing yourself. That's the very first one that you need to do. But the next one is obviously to shine that light, to shine that consciousness out, and to make sure that you do things in the world in ways that are mathematically going to be effective, physically and mathematically going to be effective for you. This means obviously that if you live in a world in which you're trying to make the world work better, but you are constantly kind of chasing those who make war, is not going to be effective, because it's like a chess game, and in chess games, who starts first, which is the white, always has 55% percentage of winning, while who starts second, so the black, has all 45% chances of winning the game, which means that mathematically speaking, until we will keep chasing what people who make war do, and we will keep trying to stop what they do, we're always going to be playing black. And so in order for us to actually change the world and to actually have a chance to win, because we already have much lesser financial power. Actually, we do have a lot of power, but we need to put it together as a population. But until we start being cohesive, until we start coordinating action, until we start really putting together our resources for us to be able to change the world all together, until then, we need to start at least playing white, which means starting to start the game instead of chasing others. How? Listen until the end of this episode, and I'm going to explain what I mean. So right now, let's just talk about war, which is the main topic, and then we're going to be talking about how to make peace instead. And I know a lot about war for a lot of reasons, and a lot about healing the world for a lot of reasons. I'm also a political activist. First of all, I have an ENFJ personality type, which is my Myers-Briggs personality, which means that I am what in ancient times will be the general of the armies, or the king of a kingdom. So my personality type is basically the leader of the leaders, the leader of the diplomats, which means that my brain is designed to be very good at understanding patterns and strategizing. Just naturally, this is not something that I do intentionally. I just perceive the world as a huge chessboard, as a huge Venn diagram in which, based on what things I'm going to do, and I'm also clairvoyant and clairsentient, which means that I know a lot of things just by moving a piece. I know all the consequences of it. And the same way I listen to the news, or I perceive where the world is going, like this, what is happening right now, which is we are really approaching towards a potential third world war. And I knew this since a long time. Like, I started telling my friends that Europe especially was going to be a battlefield, a potential battlefield in the next couple of years. I started saying it 2 years ago, and now it's actually happening. Like, now Europe is preparing for potential war, and it's pretty visible at this point that there was a whole strategy ongoing since World War II. You know, we started, like, governments started preparing for World War III since World War II had ended, because when you don't finish a business, then you have to continue making sure that your enemies, because until there are enemies, obviously there is this idea of having to defeat them for you to feel safe, for them to feel safe. They're always talking about governments and organizations that are, above the level of the population, in the sense that they are already a conglomerate of something that has positive and negative, and it has enemies and friends. And because of that, they perceive the world as this huge melting pot of things where forces are opposed, and this huge chessboard in which they are part of a team, and there are opposing teams already, even though we feel like the population, we're all friends, right? So it's not us. We are not the problem. The problem are these peaks of energy that accumulate at our elites. And those peaks of energy become like a wave that at that point needs to attack or to crash on something, because they've accumulated a lot of potential energy at that point. And so we're going to be talking about that also from a physical standpoint. And in the meantime, I have a lot of experience in making war, in the sense that making war is part of making peace as well. In the sense that we can be as peaceful as we like, but there is always a point to which you have to realize that there are people who want to make war. There are people who are not going to stop, or there are people who are doing something bad for the world, or are trying to perpetuate pain, even if they're doing so in relatively peaceful ways, like through fraud, for example, or through abuses of various kinds. That's not war, but it's still pain. So ultimately, where we want to get, what is peace? Peace is not just about not having war around. Peace is inner peace. So in the same way in which you want to heal yourself and you want to heal the world is a direct reflection of the average feeling of the population. And so the reason why we are at war today is because the consciousness of the population is low. The average consciousness is low. And so if the average consciousness is low and the average person is angry, what do you expect is going to happen at the macroscopic level, right? So that's the average. And so it's normal that for us to reach peace, we first need to reach it ourselves, because we are the ocean that crushes these waves on top of the rocks. And if the ocean is calm, there are no waves. But until the ocean is angry, then there's going to be a lot of waves. So we need to calm down our own energy for the energy of the world to change. And so that's why we need to go from ourselves to the outside. And both are absolutely necessary. And we don't need to wait to heal ourselves for us to heal the world. These are two things that can be done at the same time, and should be done at the same time, actually, because it becomes more effective. You see, like, if you heal yourself and if you don't heal the world, then the pressure from the outside is going to break your bubble and get to you and give you more stress and make it more difficult for you to maintain your healthy state, your inner peace. And instead, if as you shine, you allow your light to shine out as well, and you heal people around you, starting from your friends and from your family, and start leading them towards their own inner peace, then you're gonna spread, and see how you spread to your inner circle, then they spread to their inner circle, and so it becomes something that just spreads like oil. And then I also know a lot about war and about healing the world, because I am myself a political activist and a whistleblower. Like, for my whole life, I say that I am an immune cell of the body. And funny enough, I've been studying these immune cells that I've always been very passionate about. During my PhD, I've studied cells that are called macrophage during my PhD and during my postdoc. So macrophage are cells part of the innate immune cell of the body, meaning that they are basically the very first barrier that viruses or things that are not us, including tumors, encounter in our body. Like, these are the cells that then coordinate and help coordinating and triggering the adaptive immune response, which are the T cells, those cells that then remember the antigen and then are capable of storing a memory of the antigen. And instead, what macrophages do are, they are very interesting cells, because they have these various states of activation that they can take. And so they can help fight infections, they can help clean out debris, they can help basically play an inflammatory role at the very beginning of whatever inflammation or infection, or something that needs to be solved. They can have this warm modality, and then as soon as that is finished, because they complete it, they help healing that phase, then they switch to a different modality, which is the more regenerative modality. So they are called pro-regenerative macrophage, and so they help regenerating the wound and regenerating the site of infection. And so I realized throughout my life that I am a macrophage indeed, and that's why I was so probably fascinated by these cells. I am an immune cell, and what these cells do is like what immune cells in general do. And I'm an immune cell of that. I talk about the macrophage, just an example, but I'm an immune cell in general. And so what I've done throughout my life is as soon as I'm the kind of person that I awaken from things. And so I went through a lot of abuse, narcissistic abuse of various kinds in relationships and in the world, as a person, as a woman, as an employee, as a as an individual part of society. I've been through a lot of different types of narcissistic abuse, and uh, ultimately what I do is I swallow things for a while thanks to being naive. Like, immune cells are initially naive. They don't know what's good and what's bad, what's right and what's wrong for the body they're part of. But then through time, they go around and they check things and they swallow stuff. And then they realize, okay, this is me, this is not me. This is an antigen that comes from the outside, this is an antigen that comes from my body. And so they swallow things, literally. They ingurgite things and they swallow them and they analyze them. And once they are finished analyzing those things, they come up with an answer to that. And so basically what they do is they get infected themselves. They have to get infected themselves in order for them to understand whether that thing that they have swallowed is good or bad. They basically test the system on behalf of everybody else. Everybody else has their own function and does their own things, and the immune cells go around patrolling and checking what is good and what is bad. And so they swallow things, as I did during my life, swallowed in the sense of going through abuses, going through things, thanks to the fact that I was naive about those abuses, naive about those personality types. I didn't know anything about narcissistic abuse because I'm not a narcissist, but I was meant to be like this. I was meant to be a person, like, I kind of like every day I start a new day. I don't tend to be attached too much to like hating others, or some form of grief, in the sense that like I tend to start every day from like it's a new day for me. Every day I start with this naivete that allows me to swallow things that I don't know yet, instead of starting, oh, I have to protect myself, or I have to um, be guarded all the time. And so by not being guarded all the time, that allows me to explore, to not have the fear of exploring new things. And thanks to that, I swallow things and I analyze them and I go through things for everybody. And then I analyze them internally and I realize, wow, this is so bad. This is not good for me. Or this is so good. This is good for me. So by doing that, I'm ultimately able to discern between what's good and what's bad for us, in the same way in which, as a doctor, I would look at a tumor and be like, okay, this is the tumor, we need to cut it off. As a surgeon, we need to cut off this tumor, and this is the body we need to leave it. These cells are good. So I function basically in that way, in the sense that, and so basically what immune cells do is they swallow things so that they understand what is good and what is bad. And then the next phase is what I'm doing with this podcast, right? Is they show this antigen, these things, to the other cells, and they tell them, hey, look, this is how the antigen looks like. This is what things that are not you look like. And by doing that, they're basically instructing the other cells to recognize the antigen that is non-self, is called. And so by doing that, they're basically allowing the body to recognize what is self and what is non-self. And so the cells can recognize the viruses or the bacteria as soon as they see them, instead of allowing them to enter and to attack them. So as soon as they see them, they immediately, the cells of the body, after they've been instructed and educated, then they can start releasing cytokines, or compounds in the blood, that ultimately tell the immune cells, hey, there is a virus here. You told me that this was a virus, and now I saw it. So they send signals basically to the immune cells, and then the immune cells, which are built to destroy the antigens, they can finally go and destroy it. And so basically what they do is they patrol and they tell everybody how the antigen looks like and how the virus looks like. But this is something that not all cells can do. Only the immune cells have the capacity to swallow the viruses and analyze them and make out a pattern that is something that the other cells can recognize. And that's what I do. This is my gift. I like, from the Mayan calendar, I am a healer. I'm the Mayan doctor, and my symbol is the obsidian, the double-edged obsidian knife, which means that I am like a surgeon, exactly. And so I have this view on the world that is good and bad intentionally, because that's my function in the world. My function in the world is to be like the surgeon that allows the population to detach the tumor from us and to understand, okay, this is us, this is not us. So this is my function, and that's why this is my lens on the world. Every one of us has a different lens. This is mine because I meant to instruct you guys on how good and bad things look like, so that you are like, okay, this is good for my body, this is bad. And this is the same thing that I've done for my whole life. So because of this, because this is my personality, I am also a whistleblower, because everywhere I went, ultimately I realized, wow, if people continue doing these things in research, because I'm a scientist, if people continue doing these things in research or in the pharmaceutical industry or in healthcare, where are we going? This is nonsense. Like, logically speaking, this can only lead to destruction, because the whole principle of our current healthcare system is not healing people, but is using our bodies to farm illnesses and to continuously harvest and to continuously harvest the fruit of cultivating these illnesses through stress, pollution, fast foods and junk foods and things that ultimately don't allow us to heal and instead constantly poison us. And so you see, it's really like our whole society is really designed. Our whole society is really designed to farm illnesses through our bodies. And so this is very bad. And once you're in that system and you understand how it works, if you are if you have my personality type, then you're going to understand through the logic that I told you before where this is going to lead. And once you understand that this is leading nowhere good, then you can't possibly allow it to happen. You have to report it to the population. And so that's how I became a whistleblower ultimately. And so if you guys want to follow my Patreon channel, it's called The Church of Truth, or also on Telegram, The Church of Truth. You can find me kind of like everywhere now with this name, which is the name of my church, which is a Christian holistic spiritual church. And it's called The Church of Truth. And so this is the name that I'm using on various platforms to show to the population, to spread these things to the world, to spread what I've learned through 15 years in scientific research and in healthcare, because I've also worked as a representative for pharmaceutical companies. And it's another world that deserves a whole book, because it's unbelievable how rotten this system is, how corrupt the doctors are, how colluded the whole system is, and how really doctors just prescribe things to people, not based on the fact that people need it, but based on the fact that they need to reach a certain budget, that their representative is their friend and they invite them to dinner, and then they have to give to make them reach the bonus for winter. It's crazy. Like, it's really like unbelievable how these things really work. And when you look behind the scenes, you're like, how do people allow this to happen if they don't realize that they're actually destroying the world? Because in the long term, this can only go back to us. And there is a beautiful movie in Italy called The Medicine Vendor, which is about representatives, like pharmaceutical representatives. And ultimately, in the movie, while he is going to the doctors, and he's basically forcing the doctors, coercing the doctors to prescribe pills that are not necessary to people who then experience side effects and really don't heal. In the same way, his girlfriend is experiencing the same kind of pain due to another doctor that is not connected to him, and because of that, his girlfriend actually experiences pain and depression and other symptoms. And so, it's ultimately, if this is the world we build, this is what, what goes around comes around. And so that's why once you are an immune cell of the body, I'm a healer, right? And so I want to heal. And as soon as I realize that something is not meant to heal, and it's actually causing more pain, then I have to solve it. I have to report it, because I literally feel pain myself unless I do that. And so I have to do that. And that's because this is my role in society. And so today I'm going to be talking about war, but this whole season is about really giving you guys exposure to all these different things that we need to solve, and then we need to know where the world is headed, how the world is going. And I'm going to interview people who have things to say also in terms of problems that they have encountered in society, like things that they have realized that are ultimately not good for us, and that they have realized some form of corruption or some form of um, some form of fraud to the population, to the consumers that is going on and nobody knows about. And we're going to be exposed those things and also give you guys the tools to solve them. But let's go back to our topic, which is war. So first of all, war is, again, it's two opposites that are against one another. From a physical standpoint, our world functions in vectors. A vector is um, a force um, a force that goes in a certain direction and has a certain strength. Scientists believe that our universe is a closed system. However, we don't know about that. I don't believe that. I believe that our universe is not a closed system in the sense that I believe that we do communicate, we do disperse energy somewhere. Maybe our universe is immersed in this nothingness, but there is a nothingness outside of it, and the energy of the universe can find a place to disperse itself. And so I think this is pretty obvious, in fact, in the sense that we can see how the trends, as I was saying earlier, the trends in our earth, right, the earth itself, we can see the trends and how things are going on our planet, and this is due to how our planet works. So if we talk about our planet alone, our planet is not a closed system. And so we as humans, as a humanity on this planet, we don't experience, even if the universe is a closed system, we are not experiencing the whole closed system we live in. We're experiencing the earth, and the earth is an open system, it's not closed. So what does that mean? That means that there are forces on our planet that ultimately have to disperse themselves in order for peace to happen. Because what is peace? If you have ever done an ice cold bath, you know what inner peace means. And I guide people to do it in the right way so that they actually like cover the stomach, and so they prevent their stomach to send their mind into confusion. And once you do that, then you realize that you reach a level that I call inner peace. And it's really like your body being removed, by being healed from all the trauma, from all the heat that you have accumulated through time. And heat is trauma. Heat is trauma, and heat is also war. Because what is war? War is this energy, this traumatic energy that expands. So our Earth, the Earth, contains a very hot core. This very hot core is doesn't stay in there, right? So it's like, imagine the earth with all of these layers, and in the very inside of it, in the innermost part, is very hot, is like lava, is very hot. And so then that energy, that heat has to disperse towards the outside, which is the reason why the earth is alive and we are alive, is because the earth is hot inside, and that causes life to form on the outside as well, thanks to the fact that our planet has a lot of different kinds of chemical elements that can play with, especially carbon, that allowed the life that we know to form. But ultimately, the real reason for that life is the heat that comes from the inside of the earth and it goes outside, and it makes us ultimately pop out of it. We're like, imagine this earth as a huge pot of sauce that is boiling. It is boiling, it's simmering, but it does so in a way that we don't see it. Actually, we see it. We are the bubbles of this boiling pot that is simmering. So imagine this simmering sauce. I know I'm Italian, don't make fun of it. This is like an analogy that came so natural to me. But anyways, imagine this planet is a whole pot of sauce that simmers from the inside, from this inside part that is very, very hot. Imagine that is like the stove, right? Like the stove that is giving it energy, right? So that causes this energy to expand and to create these convective movements. As much as on the sun, the convective movements are made of rays of sun and of the what we call solar flares, which are basically really flames, in a sense, like hot lava that goes up and then goes down due to gravity. In the same way, we are the solar flares of the earth, because you see that the earth has all of these, like the grass and the plants and all these things that, yes, they have the energy to pop out, but then they disperse this energy in a fractalian way, and once they disperse it, they bloom into flowers. In the same way, some of us have more energy than that, or more capability over expanding, and because of that, because we are softer than a tree, then we can detach from the planet and roam around for a while like bubbles, and then go back to the planet as when we decay and we die, we go back to the planet. So we're just simply bubbles of these sauce of the earth that detach from it due to this heat that comes from the inside of the planet. And we detach from it, roam around for a while like bubbles, forgetful of the fact that we are the earth, and we start perceiving the earth as something that we inhabit instead of just we are pieces of the earth. And so we go back, we go around for a while, and then when our momentum starts decreasing, then we start decaying and going down. And when we lose this trauma, when we lose this heat, we start decaying and going down and going back to the earth. And this is just normal. At the same time, it's like we can maintain this momentum if we want, in the sense that we just need to prevent us from being oxidized from that's why oxidative stress is ultimately the main cause of aging, because it's all a matter of momentum and gravity, and the momentum of our particles depend on how oxidized they are. The lesser oxidized, the more momentum we have, and the more we have the energy of roaming around for a longer time. But ultimately we are the earth, so we're not actually going anywhere, we're just still here. So from a physical standpoint, what is war? War is the accumulation of all of this trauma in a bunch of people who then feel like they need to become this wave that crashes on something else. And so that's really what war is. The war is that some of us have more of these heat, some of us have more of these heat to disperse. And so it's not enough to just roam around for a while. Some of us are aggressive. Some of us are not just aggressive, they're so aggressive that they need to themselves give rise to other bubbles, like missiles, like things that are ultimately stemming from them. And they need to build um, things that are ultimately tools used for war against others. And so you see, this is just all this violence ultimately comes from the heat, from the inside, from the innermost part of the earth. So the fact that the world is changing, the climate is changing, things are changing is just part of the earth reaching different levels and starting to change and to reach a different level that is ultimately going to become a level in which we are cooling down. You see that now, for example, we are really using AI a lot and robots a lot. What are robots ultimately? Robots are forms of life, because if we transfer our intelligence into the artificial intelligence, which is what we're doing because we keep talking to ChatGPT nowadays. And what we're doing is basically we're transferring our knowledge into a machine. And what is a machine as compared to a human being? A machine is something which is colder, which has lesser trauma or lesser capability of um, of transferring trauma outside, because it's cold and it's made of metal. It's not made of a body that can have a fever, can get angry. It's ultimately made of parameters that cannot be changed very much because it's a robot. And so a robot does not have the free will to kill someone. A robot functions based on parameters that are stuck, are fixed. And so you see how, and I know this sounds horrible, but like you see how things are ultimately going towards, like these are the same people that build missiles are ultimately today building robots and AI, and they don't realize that what they're actually doing is they are basically transferring that trauma into something that cannot expand anymore, that um, cannot disperse, cannot does not have the need to continue to perpetuate that trauma anymore, nor the capability of perpetuating that trauma any longer. Because human beings can be violent, can have anger issues, can have can be psychopathic and wanting to kill others. Machines don't do that. Machines that have certain parameters cannot do that. And so it's all a matter of creating machines that are peaceful, so that all of these people that today are causing all these wars are gonna basically in time, their consciousness is going to be transferred into machines, so that instead of having people who want to perpetuate trauma, we're going to have that it becomes more of a scar on human, a scar on the planet. Like in the same way in which cities and buildings and all of these hard things, become ultimately a scar on planet Earth. If you see planet Earth as a place where all these volcanoes erupt and people make war due to the heat that disperses on the surface, then you'll see how ultimately cities are places where there is a lot of trauma. Like buildings are places where there is often a lot of trauma. People, like dysfunctional families, have been a thing for a long, long time. Now we're mostly trying to heal ourselves and heal our trauma, but for a long time apartments have been places where trauma has been trapped, like dysfunctions and anger and violence and domestic violence have been trapped. And so if you see from a macroscopic standpoint, if you see the earth as this surface on which some points are more sensitive are more capable of perpetuating trauma because maybe they're more sensitive and they're lesser thick, and so this heat from the inside disperses on the outside. The cities are basically points in which there is a lot of heat on the down the city, and because of that, people are very there is a lot of heat to disperse either from the outside or because people move from places where there is a lot of trauma. There is a lot of heat to disperse, and so it's ultimately we don't do that intentionally. This is how physically our planet works. Our planet is also alive, and so our planet is also trapping, healing itself by creating these scars and preventing this trauma from perpetuating, because if it perpetuates, it can cause wars elsewhere. So it's better to trap it into apartments so that it doesn't disperse much on the outside. So from a physical standpoint, this is really what is happening. And so in the same way, we're now going towards transferring part of our consciousness or part of our intelligence into machines and robots, so that in the future some of that trauma does not is not be dis, is not going to be dispersed anymore, is not going to be perpetuated anymore, because it stopped. It found a life form that can contain it, in the same way in which apartments contain dysfunctions and prevent dysfunctions from spreading in the world, because domestic violence stays inside the house. And this is from a physical standpoint. Please understand that I'm not saying that domestic violence needs to stay within a certain environment. I'm talking in a very scientific way, in a very physical way, about human emotions. And so this is not an empathetic way of talking, because I'm really talking from a different dimension. I'm talking from the Newtonian dimension of the world by not being part of it, because I've already made the quantum leap to the quantum dimension and the spiritual dimension as well. So looking from above, this is how the earth really looks like, and this is how human emotions really look like. It's just drama that tries to disperse. And so in the same way, we cause wars because of that. And unfortunately, a lot of this trauma is dispersed through men. Why through men and not through women? It's really because of the masculine and feminine energy, in the sense that, like, the earth and um, in the sense that masculine and feminine, most people, this yin and yang, a masculine and feminine thing, I like to explain it through an analogy about the tree. So the feminine energy is mostly the tree, and the masculine energy is mostly the pollen. And so the tree settles and takes care of the environment, but the pollen is needed to disperse the genes and to make sure to conquer all the land and to allow this plant to expand and to colonize the whole planet. And so in the same way, masculine energy in humanity is specialized in expanding, conquering. And so masculine energy has been for a long time, mostly in men bodies, because today, as you see with LGBTQ movements and all of this, ultimately we are blending in. We're not anymore just masculine and feminine in men and women. We have blended a lot in a lot of different ways. And so today there are people who have a brain that is more feminine and a body that is more masculine. It's just we're blending all together, because we're starting to, if we used to, these all are a natural consequence, but also is how it's supposed to go, because we used to be very separate. Like men used to hang out in certain places and go to certain schools, and women used to go to certain schools and hang out in certain other places. So we used to be separate all the time, but by being separate we kept being separate also, in terms of we kept maintaining that identity. But we are part of a solution, and so once you remove those barriers, then everything osmotically can really disperse. There's no need anymore to there's no need, no capability anymore to keep the feminine and the masculine within certain bodies, because now we go to schools where we are exposed to men and women at the same time, and so we learn from each other, we observe each other, like men 100 years ago, like 1,000 years ago, men were very, very, very aggressive as compared to now. And instead now men tend to be more emotional and more capable of processing their emotions and more empathetic. And so this has happened thanks to being in contact with women. And in the same way, women used to be much weaker, much softer, much lesser capable of being independent. And now they've absorbed this pioneeristic view of the world the men have, which is the pollen view on the world. And I've been raised by my grandpa, by my uncles, by men for most part. I've been raised by a lot of men in my life. So I have this very internalized masculine side of me that is not even masculine for me, it's just my personality type. But ultimately, if I see myself with other women, I tend to hang out a lot with men, because I tend to resonate a lot with men in ways that women don't. And at the same time, I tend to see women as not as I am, and I'm bisexual in fact, because I can resonate with both, but I'm neither of them in the end. And so you see how this is just, we're just blending in, right? But however, in general, and this is in average, the masculine side is always the one that conquers and that makes wars. And so that's why today we still have a lot of men are the ones carrying this vector of force that is ultimately a force that needs to disperse trauma and needs to make war, not just through their bodies, but through things that their bodies create, like missiles, like shuttles, like airplanes, like things that stem from them and that are ultimately tools of war. So, from a masculine and feminine side, we need to truly, and we're already blending, but at the same time, we need to start switching towards the more feminine side of our humanity, of humanity. Like the earth needs to switch more to the feminine side, because now we have conquered all the land. We've already conquered it. We've already covered everything. And so what we need to do right now is not anymore conquering, but is settling and understanding. We need to start taking care of what we have conquered, taking care of our planet and taking care of ourselves, and healing and nurturing. And so this is the feminine, not women, but feminine side of us. And the feminine side can be men, can be women. It's not about the sex. It's about the energy that we are carrying. It's about the part of the brain that we are using. The part of the brain that really nurtures is the feminine one. And so we need to switch towards it. And we're doing that because now you see there are a lot more leaders that are women and feminine. However, unfortunately, for a lot of times, because we're still in a phase of war, a lot of times our feminine leaders are actually women leaders that are very masculine. A lot of women in the world that are leaders are ultimately people who want to make war, people who are simply being put there because there is a war to make and men don't want to take their responsibility anymore and they want to give it to women. And so these women are just put there for them to look like women, but they're not. They're very masculine inside. And so we need to start switching towards feminine leadership, not masculine leadership. That is going to make a huge difference. Is going to really change the world, because what we need to do is really to start switching towards the feminine side. And the feminine side does not make war. The feminine side nurtures. And this is not to do with women or men. It has to do with being more feminine. And it's already happening. And you can see how I say that you can see how on our planet the trend has been to get better. I have it tattooed here. I say it all the time. It says nothing bad can happen, which means simply that despite we go in waves, we expand in waves, and so there's always a wave that is somewhat aggressive or bad or violent, but then there's peace after. And the more we keep going, it's like a ripple effect. The more we keep going, the more the space between these rings that expand become bigger, and the more the rings become weaker. And so the more we keep going, the more on the outer edges of this ripple effect, there is just peace. And so we're going towards peace. We used to have these very violent wars in which people were killed in very violent ways, and now it happens, but in different ways. And so I know that today talking about this, and you're like, but God, so many people died. It's true, but like the entire world used to be a war. Like if you read about the Roman Empire, for example, like Marcus Aurelius is like most of his empire, like his years as an emperor, have been making war to expand the empire. Like the greater majority of is like I think it was like 40 years or 30 years or something like that he's been an emperor. Like most of it is been spent just going around and starting battles and killing people and submitting populations. And they were very violent at that time. They were very like they would literally like torture people, and like even the way of killing was very, very violent. It had nothing to do with what we do today. And there is still a lot of violence today. There are people who kill children. There are people who torture others. There is still a lot of violence. However, it happens a lot, for example, in secret societies, in satanic cults, for example. They're very widespread, unfortunately, but it's never going to be like it was in the past. We're talking about something that today, for people to do that, they need to hide. So they can't even do it open air. And instead, 1,000 years ago, that was the norm. It was like people would do very crazy things, and that was just the norm. They could do it on a stage. They could actually make people pay a ticket to see a torture. So that is not happening today anymore in that way. There are people doing that, but they have to do it underground, which means that we already improved a lot. So you see this trend, how it's going, and that's why I always talk about it. I've written a book called The Fractal Universe and the Theory of Everything that ultimately explains how we are blooming into consciousness. It's the earth that is cooling down and is going to bloom into consciousness, and in the same way in which AI and robots are going to be used to stop the perpetuation of this trauma, there is going to be another side of humanity, which is going back to the roots and going back to nature, and that is those who are really trying to heal, the healers and the healed part of the population. We are going to be the other part, which is instead going to be more at peace, and we're not going to have to deal anymore with violent people, because those violent people are going to become robots. And so ultimately there's not going to be perpetuation of trauma anymore. And you see how this ripple effect is going towards peace. Slowly but surely we're going towards peace. So it's just a matter of time, but we can accelerate it. Like ultimately we are alive. Things don't happen it's not just about physics. Yes, it is about physics, but the universe is alive, the earth is alive. And so if we want, we could stop it like this. It's up to us. It's our unconsciousness that ultimately perpetuates all of these trauma, all of these things. Because by being unconscious, we're ultimately allowing that. So we're going towards peace. Slowly but surely, we're going towards peace. However, we can actually accelerate the process because it's our unconsciousness that ultimately allows this trauma to expand. And there are various reasons for that. And now I'm going to be talking about also the difference between the Newtonian and quantum physical dimensions, for example. So imagine the difference between like the Newtonian and quantum physical dimension as the difference between the atomic dimension and the body's dimension, right? So at the atomic level, forces that are very important at the atomic level for us are completely irrelevant. Obviously, they have an effect on us, but from a consciousness standpoint, we're not worried all the time because the electron is going around the nucleus, right? We're not worried for that because it's irrelevant. There's so many electrons, so many atoms, so many things that go on. We're talking about billions and billions and billions and billions of particles that make up our bodies. And so what they do is completely irrelevant for us. We're not worried about that. We're not triggered by an atom not being able to stay in our body and for us having to shed away pieces of our skin. We're not worried about our skin peeling off, or we're not worried about our body changing too much other than wrinkles. So we're not scared and we're not worried. We don't get triggered. We don't get anxiety due to things that happen at the subatomic level. And so, in the same way, once you get to the quantum level, you're not worried anymore about things that happen at the physical and the Newtonian physical dimension. So, the Newtonian physical dimension is the dimension where there is gravity, where we're aging, where our bodies are subjected to things, where we are the body, and where we talk to people and we get triggered by things that they say, because what they do and what happens in society is relevant to us at the Newtonian physical level. The Newtonian physical level is the Newton talks about attrition and forces that move objects around and gravity that pulls us down. That is the Newtonian physical dimension. At the quantum physical dimension, there is no gravity anymore because it's a dimension in which we're moving straight. We have escaped gravity already, and we're moving just in uniform motion like a planet does around the sun. So once you are at the Earth level, basically, so the Earth is not worried about what I am doing right now. The Earth is so big, and there are so many of me, so many people like me on the Earth, that I'm just a bubble that is detaching and going back. And so the Earth ultimately knows that I'm just detaching and going back, detaching and going back. And I've been doing this for a long time and for a lot of times. So for the Earth, is not relevant what I do. And so once you get to the consciousness of the Earth and to the consciousness of the quantum physical dimension, you stop being triggered by things. And so you see how this is relevant for a war perspective, because in war, we act as if things are important, if we have to kill other people in order for us to survive. Once we understand that we're just bubbles that detach from the Earth and we're just here temporarily as a body, but our consciousness never goes anywhere, all of those things stop making any sense. And so they stop making sense, and we stop having to create wars and to start wars and to kill others for us to survive. Because first of all, we realize that we're all brothers and sisters. And second, we also realize that this body is just temporary, and we're just part of it. We're just part of the body as a soul. Our body is just an antenna that gets our soul, gets our highest self, and we can curate it and heal it and make sure that it's healthy and pure, so that we can attract the highest possible frequency that this body that we are currently occupying can attract, because everybody can attract a different kind of frequency from the universe, which is the reason why we have different personality types, different souls. So different bodies can attract different things, and the more healthy we are, the more our doshas are in balance, the more we are tuned in the right and proper frequency. Our doshas, we talked about the Ayurveda and the doshas with Shanti in one of the episodes of the series, season 1. You can go and check it out. The doshas ultimately are what we are. And so when we aggravate one of our doshas, we can become also more aggressive. If we aggravate the pitta dosha, for example, we can become more aggressive. But in the same way, if we aggravate the kapha or kapha dosha, we can also become lazy and not do the function we have. And so you see that from a quantum physical dimension, as long as we are synchronized in the proper frequency, then we can be at peace, and we can, like, what happens around us doesn't really matter, in the sense that we have our function, we do our thing, and ultimately things happen in the way in which they're supposed to happen, because every one of us is just a piece of a puzzle. And altogether, this puzzle makes up for the laws of the universe. Everything follows the laws of the universe, but ultimately there is some form of deviation, right? We are vibrating at all times. We are like electrons. Electrons are like not in one place at one time, like they are like a cloud that surrounds the nucleus. They're a cloud because they move so fast that they're both a wave and and a particle. But reality is that we also are both a wave and a particle, because in the quantum dimension, we can be a lot of different things. There are a lot of realities that are happening at the same time, because we vibrate in a spectrum of possibilities. And so I'm talking to you right now and I'm saying these things in a very slightly parallel reality. I'm saying something slightly different. These things are happening all at the same time. It's a spectrum, and it's up to me and to my body to synchronize in that specific thing. So you see what I mean when I say that our body matters, because in every reality, my body is slightly different, and so my doshas are a little different. So there is a parallel reality in which my body can reach a certain, like, because my body can have a certain variability in which, in terms of fat, amount of muscles, and all of these things, based on what my body allows me to vibrate within, what kind of values my body allows, then that defines what kind of realities I can experience. And I can also change my body to experience a different reality, a different quantum dimension, a different quantum reality. But in this reality, it's different, because then once you are already uniform motion, you have already escaped gravity, you're already like on this plateau of you moving straight. And this specifically has to do with the middle age, the middle part of our life, our adulthood, in which we have already escaped gravity, we have already healed trauma, we have already have our ego death. And once you reach that point, then you're not anymore in the Newtonian physical dimension, as much as we are not anymore in our atomic dimension. You're in a dimension that is the dimension of the body, and your soul in is in the quantum physical dimension, which means that what happens to your body becomes irrelevant. Becomes irrelevant because you realize that the consciousness doesn't go anywhere. That this body is just an antenna and it goes back, but then the consciousness is still here, and we are the whole. Once you realize that we are the universe, and I guide this beautiful meditation that I call the We Are One meditation, that helps people reach the consciousness of the universe and realize that they are the universe, so that they stop worrying about things. Reaching the quantum dimension is so important, because it helps us rise the consciousness of humanity and of ourselves, so that we stop worrying about what other people are doing, and stop thinking we need to kill others. Like, so ultimately, war has to do with unconsciousness, but also with this belief that we need to conquer the entire planet in order for us to feel safe. And this is not how everybody thinks. This is really just how certain people think. And we go into the spiritual and divine dimension. So in the spiritual and divine dimension, and when I get to that, I talk about the gospel and Christianity. So I founded a church that believes in the gospel and the New Testament, but is agnostic regarding the Old Testament. Because if you read the gospel and the New Testament, you realize how different they are from the Old Testament. It's almost as if the scriptures at that time were different, because what Jesus refers to is completely, like, what he teaches and preaches is completely different from what was preached and taught before. And so you're like, what is what? So we are agnostic about that. And as a whistleblower, I know firsthand how manipulated things can be. So just decided to be agnostic about the Old Testament, and that's why I founded a church for that. But in the gospel, Jesus talks about evil and the devil. And I talked about this in a previous episode too, in which I talked about how um, how Jesus describes the universe as in various ways. Like, he describes the universe, first of all, in a fractalian way. So he says that the kingdom of God is like a seed of mustard that you plant, and then that creates a huge tree, and it branches out and becomes big, that um, so big that birds can go and make their nest there and hang out in the tree. And so he basically describes the universe as a fractal, as I described it in my book, The Fractal Universe and the Theory of Everything, before even reading the gospel myself. It's really obvious that the universe is a fractal, that we are fractals, that everything is a fractal here. And so the fact that he says that then there are, like, it becomes so big that then there are like birds that can hang out on it, that refers to angels and like entities that are ultimately, in a different dimension. So in the same way in which we don't see our atoms, and we can't possibly relate to to an atom. We can study atoms, but we can't understand them. We are not atoms. We're on a different level. So in the same way, we can't see other levels. So if there are angels, if there are spiritual dimensions, like we can't see that, but God is real. God is a real thing. It's ultimately the ultimate dimension of truth we are embedded in, and it's a completely different dimension. It's in the same way in which the atomic dimension and the Newtonian physical dimension for us are different and are really different scales. It's a different scale. Once you understand that you're a different scale, you understand, okay, so we're talking about something that we are embedded in, but it includes us. And so we are not, until we identify with this body, and we are this body right now, we cannot possibly understand what the spiritual dimension is. But I had a Kundalini awakening, so I have experienced firsthand, and I had like a calling, and I literally um, have been thrown in the spiritual and divine dimension, and so I know what it is, and it's just a dimension of pure love and pure joy and pure compassion. It's just this white, beautiful dimension where there is no time. Everything is eternal. We are eternal. And so it's just a dimension of joy. Joy is really what it is at its core. And we've just forgotten, just some of us have just forgotten about that dimension. And so they have fallen down. That's why, the evil and devil, God and Jesus talks about this falling down, this fallen angel ultimately that has decided to stay here. It's just about forgetting about the divine dimension and wanting to exist as an entity on its own. And because of that, it's just you know can't reach that level anymore. And if you can't reach that level anymore, you have to make of the mundane, of the world, your own thing. And so that's why we have all these satanic organizations that are ultimately leading our planet. Because if you can't lead anywhere else, if you can't escape anymore, then you're gonna want to lead where you are, right? You're gonna want to become the prince of the earth, which is what Jesus talks about. He talks about the devil. And so, from that standpoint, from a spiritual and a Christian standpoint, there is constantly this war against these between these two sides, which is those who can't reach the spiritual dimension, but they could. It's just a matter of time. It's not a matter of trauma. Trauma correlates a lot with that, in the sense that people who there is ultimately a genetic and epigenetic level in which trauma exists. Like there are certain people, like again, if we go back in time to when the earth when humans started evolving on this planet, we ultimately are carrying around a lot of pain, a lot of trauma, and we roam around and we have legs because we are the ones on this planet with the most trauma whatsoever. And so the reason why we cause wars and we perpetuate this trauma is because we have to disperse it. We have to disperse this trauma. So it's totally normal. However, trauma is not just our behavior. Trauma is ingrained in our genes. Trauma is ingrained in our epigenome. So what are cycle breakers, for example? Cycle breakers are people who have cleansed from trauma from a genetic and epigenetic standpoint. And that's why they're so different from their parents, and they're often considered the black sheep because they are different. They are a new generation. It's almost being a new species. But today we're going towards that. And so you see how this is changing. We're blooming towards that. Like the trend is towards consciousness, is towards getting better. And so by doing that, ultimately, we have to cleanse trauma from a genetic and epigenetic standpoint. And what is trauma? Trauma is evil. What the gospel talks about ultimately is this evil that is made of the mundane, is made of the earth, or is made of this dimension, the only thing that exists. And so it started, it's like you think this is your home, then you're gonna have to embellish it. You're gonna have to make it your own. You're gonna have to create a whole fictitious reality on how this is the most beautiful place you can be in. And instead, there is much, much better that you have forgotten, which is the divine dimension, the spiritual dimension, the joy. So these people have forgotten the joy, and they started becoming sadistic instead. But this comes from their genes, this comes from their epigenome. And so at the spiritual level, there is constantly this war ongoing against between these two teams, the team of those who are awakened, the angels in a sense, like those who have awakened to the spiritual dimension, or those who are sent here and are very conscious, like Jesus, who are sent here to spread peace and to spread compassion, to spread joy and to spread healing, because Jesus was not at war with anybody. He was trying to spread peace. He was trying to spread healing. He was trying to heal the world. So there are those sent here to constantly try to heal the world, and there are those instead who have fallen and forgot how to go back, and because of that, they occupy bodies that also can't can't reach certain levels because they're souls. And so, like, our souls and our bodies completely correlate. Like, so if you have a certain body, you're gonna have a certain soul, because your body is like the antenna for your soul. And so from a Gaussian standpoint, like, we are distributed like in a Gaussia way. Like, you can see humanity, there are people who are short, people who are tall, people who are like ugly, people who are beautiful. And I know this is a black and white way of seeing things, but again, I have to see the world in this black and white way because that's my role. But you see how this is distributed in a Gaussian way. Like, you can go anywhere and see how there are people who are really like different heights, and then people who are taller and skinnier. You can see this kind of distribution. So this happens because that's how the Earth works. That's how the heat from the planet is dispersed. And so this creates different kinds of humans that ultimately, some of them are capable of connecting with certain kinds of souls. And um, I'm not saying that people who are more beautiful have better souls. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we are different. There is a diversity. And so the different bodies can attract different things, but different bodies come from different genes. And so different genes and different epigenomes. And the epigenome is basically, to give you a very brief example, I talk about this a lot, but I want to give you, like, I try to explain every time a little bit. So the genes are basically your DNA, right? And so your DNA is what ultimately defines your identity. And what you become depends on your DNA. You cannot do anything that is beyond what your DNA's potentials are. However, your DNA can be used in very different ways at very different times. And the epigenome is instead what defines how your DNA is used. And so if, for example, you have a gene for a certain color of your skin, the color of your skin can also be modulated to be expressed in a certain way based on how much sun there is, or based on the kind of environment you're surrounded by or you grow up in. And so it's not fixed. Like, people with the same gene can still have slightly different colors of skin, or maybe they can have conditions in which part of their skin is white, part of their skin is black, or like me, for example, I get tan under the sun, but in winter I become very pale. So you see, it can be used in different ways based on our epigenome. And I'm just giving examples here. I'm not giving scientific information on genes. These are just examples. Like, the skin is just a way of making you understand that there are variations, right? And there are variations in various ways, like, personality type, skin type, like how your organs are made, how your body is made. But all of these things and your neurobiology, which ultimately determines whether you are more of an empathetic person or more of a sadistic person, all those things also depend on your genes and on your epigenome as well. And so for you to not be sadistic at all, you have to not have certain genes, or you have to have an epigenome that allows you to not use the genes that make you become sadistic, because everything is a genetic component. We are ultimately the reflection, the root cause of everything we are is ultimately our genes from a physical standpoint. And our souls can only really attract, we can occupy a certain body, but ultimately there are, again, variations. Like, a good soul can occupy a body that is slightly sadistic sometimes, maybe, but then this lifetime is meant for us to cleanse this body, physically speaking. And so ultimately what we do every reincarnation, it's really to purify our body and our soul more and more and more until we reach consciousness, as I was saying, until the universe, the whole planet, the whole universe uh, bloom into consciousness. And so we are raising the consciousness, but we have to go through multiple cycles, because these multiple cycles are needed for us to cleanse from this trauma, to disperse all this energy, to sublimate. We're literally, through our bodies, we're sublimating the energy of the earth that comes from sublimation. Is something that happens when something solid becomes evaporates, like ice that evaporates, for example. So like dry ice, for example, sublimates. So it goes from solid to gas. And so that is sublimation. So ultimately we're solid, but we're sublimating energetically the trauma that comes from the inside of the earth. And we're doing that through words, through gestures. We are not necessarily doing it physically, we're doing it energetically. We're sublimating all this trauma. So you see how ultimately, in the long term, in the long run, the earth as a planet is sublimating its own heat towards the outside. And we're doing that in a lot of different ways. There are also people who are doing that by building shuttles who are going to bring to other planets very traumatized individuals and psychopathic people who are causing a lot of trouble on this planet. And so as soon as they will leave, for example, that already is going to be a huge, huge improvement. So, however, at the spiritual level, there's always this fight between these two people that have to do with all the dimensions, because it has to do with the physical Newtonian physical dimension, with the genes, with the atoms that we contain, with everything, with all the dimension of us. Everything has to start becoming more peaceful. And so how do we do that ourselves? First of all, I have created these podcasts too. So how do we create peace ourselves? How do we help the earth to sublimate all of this trauma? And how do we help to cleanse the world from evil? So first of all, I talk about this. Basically, the entire podcast is about this, about how to heal ourselves, how to reach trauma healing, how to reach the ego death through holistic modalities. This is not just to do with psychology and therapy and like psychologically speaking, right? We can do the psychological, but again, we are physical objects, so we need to take care of our body. And that's why I created a church that is called Holistic Church as well, because we need to also take care of our body in a holistic way, because that's the only possible way to heal ourselves. And I'll give you an example that comes from myself, from my own experience. Like in the past 2 years, I have really cleansed from trauma at the biological level by becoming vegan. I'm basically becoming fruitarian, because I'm basically trying to really avoid to eat in a very non-violent way. And so I'm mostly eating fruit, and fruit is something that is completely free from trauma, because fruit are supposed to be eaten. You're not killing anybody. It's a non-violent way of eating. So seeds and fruit are just meant to be eaten ultimately. That's what the plant does. The plant creates the fruit so that it's juicy and good, and we want to eat it, and we help disperse. This is not what we do, but like actually we do, but like animals, for example, eat fruit and then they poop the seed that they swallow somewhere else. They carry that seed somewhere else. And so it's part of the strategy of the plant, that the plant uses to disperse itself. And so you see how those are meant to be eaten. We're not killing anything. You don't have to cut a vegetable out and to kill a plant. You are simply eating its fruit, which the plant wants you to eat. So first of all, going towards a more lesser violent way of eating is absolutely necessary. It's like, this is not an option. Like, I'm sorry, guys, this is not an option. We need to stop killing. That's how we make peace. And we need to stop eating trauma, because when you eat a cow, when you eat meat that has been created, that is being generated through trauma, through torture, that meat is going to contain hormones and things that your body is going to recognize as trauma. Like, your body knows that certain molecules in an animal are generated due to tortures, due to trauma, due to lack of joy, due to confinement into these crazy mass farms There are massive farms. There are really horrible places for animals. So if you eat things that come from violence and from torture, your body is going to eat violence and torture, and that is going to affect your epigenome and potentially also your genome, because our bodies is like a sponge ultimately that our genes have built to protect their own identity. And so all of these layers that we have, the genomes, the cell membrane, the organs, all the things that surround our organs, and the muscle fascia and the skin, and all of these things, and all of these, fractalian fractal shaped circulatory system, everything in the lymphatic system, all of these things are ultimately meant to disperse all the energy that we receive from the outside and from the food that we eat. But there is a point where we can't really fight against that pressure anymore, and we go back to the bubble that I talked about at the beginning. There is a point where our genes are like, okay, I created all these layers, but you're giving me so much trauma, so much stuff to deal with, that I'm clogged. I cannot deal with it anymore. And so that breaks all the barriers and goes to our DNA, and it causes mutations to our DNA. And when that happens, it's almost as if we go back in time. You see, I told you that nothing bad can happen, but we are evolving genetically. And so when you allow things from the outside to penetrate to the point of mutating your genes, it's like you're going back in time. You're really literally going back in time, and you're allowing your genes to change in ways that instead of improving, they're getting worse. So it's fundamental for us to instead get better also from a nutritional standpoint. So nothing bad can happen means that you're supposed to go towards a higher level of consciousness, not backward. So you don't want to eat things that bring you backward. So it's very important for people to start eating healthy and to stop eating things that come from violence. And I'm not saying necessarily to stop eating meat at all, but at least to stop eating meat that comes from mass farms, because that's really the worst. That's really the worst that you can do to your body. That then there's various levels and have to do with polluting our mind, polluting our soul, and this has to do with the kind of content we consume. So you really want to cleanse the content you consume every day, to make sure that you don't ingest through content violence like horror movies or things that ultimately make you more traumatized than you were before. You always want to use things that propel you to go forward and that help you to transmute the energy that you need to transmute to move forward to a higher level of consciousness, or to do the things you need to do to have your own function in the world and to make the world a better place, right? And so this is the first thing you need to do, to like make sure that you don't perpetuate trauma on yourself. That's the first thing. And then the same thing goes to your surroundings. This is the next level, and this is so important. Like, if you start having a higher level of consciousness, you need to start sharing with the people around you books that help you, podcasts that help you, things that help you improve, and practices that help you improve. And there are also beautiful things like the ayahuasca, for example. It's a beautiful way of cleansing from evil and from trauma. So what you do is ultimately like purging. Like, there are a lot of ways. Like, I help people declutter their bodies, their liver, and their gallbladder, and this is fundamental as well, because the clutter can take the shape of mutated genes and epigenome, or physiological, biochemical, neurobiological. And so you want to make sure that you cleanse from all of that, so that you can shine out all the healing you have experienced. And then you can do the same with people around you, and so you can tell people around you, hey, I have found this resource that is helping me, or I have gone through these things that help me. So you see how it gets better. At the same time, we need to purge out things that don't serve us anymore. In the same way, we need to purge out relationships that don't serve us anymore, jobs that don't serve us anymore. We need to start being very conscious and very intentional in everything that we do. We can't just have a job to have a job and see that we are helping our company to pollute the world with things that are not necessary, or to defraud the consumers, or to defraud the taxpayers. Like, we need to start really becoming intentional and conscious in what we do, and in the same way expect the same from others. This is the level of healing the world. The level of healing the world goes beyond yourself. Yes, you have healed yourself, But the level of healing the world means you have to expect, you have to peer pressure others into doing the same, into healing themselves, and into preventing trauma from spreading. This is the most important part, because yes, you can heal, but if you don't prevent trauma from spreading in the same way in which you don't prevent yourself from being from ingesting things that give you more trauma, what are you doing, right? Like, you're basically these forces, these vectors that we talked at the beginning. You're from one side, you are um, putting out a vector of a force that is, you're shining your light, but from another side, you're allowing something to hit you with the same force. The result is zero. Like, the ultimate result is going to be zero. So you're actually not doing anything. You're not improving the world. You're not improving yourself. You're zero. You're neutral. So for things to get better, you need to make sure that the vector out is stronger and more powerful than the vector in. And so to do that, the ultimate way is, because you shine naturally, we shine naturally. We just have to shine joy. Once you reach joy, you just have to shine. However, if you also keep allowing things to get to you, you're never going to be able to shine. You're never going to, because that is going to quench the light that you put out. So you need to really make sure that you neutralize things around you. And the first thing to do is to take care of your immediate surroundings, your family, your friends, your colleagues. Like, this is the most important thing. Your social media, you want to make sure you don't pollute the world, or you don't allow things to get to you in various other ways. So for you to not pollute the world as well. And so you're like healing your surroundings, but in the same way, they're going to heal their own surroundings as well. So you're basically creating a ripple effect that is ultimately healing the world in a very, in a inexpensive way, in an exponential way. And we're going to get there. It's just a matter of time. So you see, these are things that you can do in your daily life. This is not something crazy. You don't need to go to talk to your president. You don't need to go talk to your politicians to do these sort of things. These are things that you can create by yourself in your daily life. You just have to keep, first of all, to acquire healthy habits and to heal yourself, and then to make sure that other people around you do the same, and to make sure that you don't disperse trauma towards them. You don't perpetuate trauma towards them. So you want to make sure that, if you have trauma to disperse, you disperse it on your own, in the sense of like finding ways of like dispersing trauma in ways that are private, for example, through meditation or through uh, dancing, or through whatever activity that helps you disperse trauma. I dance every weekend, for example, and it's like I do a sort of like shamanic dance in which I disperse all the negative energy, or the energy that I accumulate through the week, and at the same time I absorb the drums and the music that people play around me. That is a very healing type of music. So you see how basically you can disperse things in various ways. So in the same way, however, heat from food and from sauna, for example, or from the gym, or the music you can listen to, those things can also perpetuate trauma a lot. So it's very important to start really becoming like crazy about making sure that your the content you consume is very, very positive, and it does not further perpetuate trauma. But these are things you can do in your daily life. You don't need to do anything crazy. Like, these are things you can and you want to do. But these are things you can do in your daily life. So I hope you guys you enjoyed this episode. And we're going to be talking more about this. And you see, it's not about going against uh, a vector. It's not about making war. It's not about um, counteracting something. It's about really blocking things and going on your own direction. Like, healing yourself is not about preventing people from hurting you, or it's not about having discussions with people and trying to explain to them why they're wrong. It's about being on your own track, doing your own thing, so that your vector can really stand out and you're playing white this time. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and there's going to be more about not war, but like how to heal the world in different ways based on different kinds of things that are happening. Today, this was a general introduction to this new season, but I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next time.